I was just about to introduce you a little bit to our audience. I was mentioning your book, Handbook of Tyranny, which I found so remarkable that we thought we have to have the content of the book in some way in our exhibition Under the Radar, which is still on show until the end of August. And what's interesting is that when Corona happened, basically we thought this is such an interesting connection, because the phenomenon of Corona could have just been another chapter in the book somehow, because your book describes, let's say, architecture that isn't normally in magazines or architecture coffee table books, but you describe or you draw basically special typologies that have to do with limitations, that limit territories, that create fences and so on. Slaughterhouses, for instance, but also border fence stations and so on. And since Corona, all we hear about is distance, right? We hear about how we can keep a distance between each other towards infectious surfaces and so on. So in a way, the phenomenon of Corona almost begged to be treated by you as well for the exhibition, and that's exactly what you did with your students at the University of Kassel. You did a studio called the Pandemic Space, and yet another one. And both of these studios' results have been now published, so to speak, in our exhibition, because we installed this material this week and created a kind of Corona update of our show. So our dear audience, you're very welcome to discover this content in our show. And we thought it's nice if we have a chance to talk with Theo today a little bit about this project. So Theo, tell us a little bit, why did you decide to make this studio? I mean, because you must have reacted very, very quickly when the phenomenon occurred. You must have taken a very swift decision to basically work on this with your students.
Yes, I mean, I was running behind in setting up my studios at the university. So I usually should kind of send in the new program in December, January. I was, running much behind. And as it happens, the whole start of the new semester was delayed due to Corona. So I had more time to develop the studio and the projects. And of course, I mean, it was, one hand, I was hesitating because I'm not much in favor of, how would you say, theme jumping. You know what I mean? That whenever there's a new theme, you just hop on it and it's hip and so. So my first reaction was almost, no, don't do something about it and just wait till there's more clarity. But on the other hand, I thought, as you said, it's very, very close. The phenomena are very close to what is described in the Handbook of Tyranny, on a much different scale or level. But I thought there's a huge potential of just trying it and testing it, and together with the student, if we can discover somehow the architectural and urbanistic implications and what it could mean for the future of architecture and urbanism.
Can you?
Is the sound okay? I mean,
yeah, the sound is fine.
Okay.
Yeah. Can you give a little bit of some visual examples of the work you did with the students, so that our audience can get a kind of an idea?
Yes. I mean, I set up a little bit the prints as you have it in the exhibition. We did hang it in the office here, so I could go through the prints.
Yeah, let's do that. And let's
as
talk
we said.
about it.
Yeah. Okay. But then I have to make a little walk.
So you get a a free studio visit of Theo
Yeah,
Deutinger.
at least of the ceiling.
Yes, very good.
It's a ceiling visit. But I have to change camera now. So yeah. So here, here's actually the intro of the exhibition, which is, I mean, there are two parts of the exhibition, and because I have one studio and one seminar at the University in Kassel, and the studio is called the epidemic space, and the seminar is called the image of a virus. I will first show you quickly some examples we developed for the studio, the pandemic space. Here's the introduction, which we together made with the students, is where you see here the infection rates per country. So it's Switzerland, France, and Germany. Since Basel is on the border of these three, in Switzerland, on the border to France and Germany. So we thought to have these three infection rates. And here on the left side of the curve, you see the restrictions, and on the right side, you see the loosening of the restrictions. And the arrow is showing the exhibition under the radar. So you are in Basel, and the dotted line is where you switch to the online version of your exhibition. What we added yesterday was this, which is not in the exhibition, is the DAX index. I don't know the English word. Is it DAX? The DAX.
Yeah, the stock exchange, basically.
Yeah, the German stock exchange rate, which is surprisingly coming back to its niveau which it had in November. So that's a big mystery, how there could be, so if the stock exchange is indicator for trust, how there can be so much trust again after such a radical change. But that's a different topic. I just like the mirroring of just the visual mirroring of infection rates and the rebounds of the stock exchange. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, and here we have several chapters in this book we want to make, the epidemic space. Here it's about, it's in German. Here it's about the apartment, living inside. Here it's about the supermarket. We also analyzed the inner city, the parks, and at the end also the protesting, how to protest in pandemic times. Just to give few examples, for example, of the supermarket, here you have like very much in Neufeld style, human being with, how do you call it? How do you translate Einkauf? Shopping cart, human being with shopping cart. So that's somehow a pairing which developed throughout which is and how you could say a spatial implication of the pandemic space, that you have to take a shopping cart. So
because it gives distance, right, to the next person.
Exactly. So together with this tool, you have a certain distance, and you provide the pandemic safe space. And the students analyzed some countries, like here in Slovakia, you have it's compulsory to wear a mask and gloves. So the pandemic human being in the supermarket is even more protected, and this differs very much between the countries. Also here, for example, this is from another chapter where you see the different distances which are compulsory. Here in Bulgaria, it's 2.5 meters, where we have the other countries like Denmark and Estonia, it's 2 meters. Then 2 meters, yes. And then we have 1.5 meters, like in Austria, I guess. No, Austria is a meter. I even don't know the distance of my own country, very funny. Okay, no, because I'm so used to Germany and Holland. In Holland, they talk about the 1.5 meter society. So it's already a new word and a new, part of a new language.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently a new society appeared. And here's the Austrian space. And there are some countries where even there are no compulsory distances, like Finland, Kazakhstan, Croatia, Belarus, and so on.
Okay.
Yeah, we have, I could, maybe one interesting, you were also our guest critic,
Mm-hmm.
so you know the work a bit. One interesting analysis is how to manage when you encounter people in the park, how to manage to keep the pandemic safe distance. So students analyze dynamics, weight dynamics, how to cross and how to pass people in different situations. This is the encounter of two people with a family of 4, several crossing situations, X crossing, T crossing, a very complicated, the students can describe it much better than me, but it's a very complicated encounter here of 4 people on a X crossing, how to manage that you keep always this distance of 1.5 meters.
I mean, in some ways, it's really interesting because you draw these choreographies of human avoidance in the same way that Neufeld would draw like spatial typologies, like hospitals, schools, and so on. And I wonder how you would use this material, because its function is almost, enlightenment kind of, approach to space. If pandemics become a more frequent company for us in our society, it could actually be that this kind of material would used in schools. Could you imagine that?
Yes, at least. I mean, now let's put it like that. Politicians made rules, and we did retroactively draw the plans to these rules.
Mm-hmm.
So politicians said, keep distance of 1.5 meter. And that's almost an architectural assignment or urbanistical assignment. We took on this assignment and did look, what does it mean, these 1.5 meters or 2 meters? Yes, in many different occasions, like the supermarket, at the car. So it's very, for us now, very normal almost. That's how it is in pandemic times. Yeah, and it's either a historical document, hopefully, maybe we never encounter the same situation again, coming historical document, or as you said, it's a blueprint for next time. Or we could develop new strategies which are not, I always find it, we are very much in, also here we see it, we are very much in a plastic warfare. Everything is plastic. It's plexiglass, gloves. I don't want to see all these heaps of plastic. So it's a huge environmental damage, I think, which is going on, which is, I mean, of course, less CO2, but the amount of plastic must be enormous. Mm-hmm. So we could do much better.
Okay.
Maybe. Yeah.
So thanks for this insight into the material. I think it gives us a certain kind of idea, I think, for the audience that hasn't been yet in the museum. That's cool. Is there any other material you wanted to show, or?
Yeah, we did a seminar on, there are 2 infiltration seminars. One is on Neufeld and one is on Neurath. Otto Neurath is an Austrian scientist who developed this isotype language. And as we infiltrated the Neufeld, we did the same with Neurath. and we have 11 chapters of investigating into the different implications. Like here, very simple one, how I'm still have to get you become a cameraman here. Here, yeah, like traveling by plane, how this works. So you get temperature gets measured. Here temperature gets measured, and you have to check in contactless and indifference, or I mean, yeah.
Seating, basically, right?
That
you
seating,
have distance seating.
Organization is different, so more space between different seats. The reason I prepared, I have here the book on the table. What is very interesting, so the Neurath book is The Modern Man in the Making from the 1939. Just a quick explanation on the first page. What I really like, because the book is developed after the tuberculosis outbreak, and here he describes how pandemic spread in 4 steps, historically, but also somehow also historical, but also political and organizational. And his kind of solution was the League of Nations, which would develop something like the WHO, which would prevent pandemics from spreading worldwide. That's what he wrote in 1939, years before the WHO was founded. So he kind of said, only if we work together globally, we can prevent pandemics from spreading. And that's why I actually thought it's very good to take that book and look at our times. Yeah.
That's cool. So maybe we can switch back the camera to you, that we can talk again. Cool. Thanks for this brief overview of the material that you produce. Obviously, it's a little difficult with this small camera and display space that we have here, but it's just to give some sort of an appetite for our audience. There will be a book as well. You publish very prolifically your material, and it's always a feast for the eye to actually study this work, which is so meticulous and so precise, this analysis, and it's very often really eye-opening. I wanted to pick your brains about the question which this condition will affect the discipline of architecture, urbanism, and spatial planning in the long run. Because the interesting thing is the discourse is kind of split, right? You can almost identify 3 different positions. There's one camp that says, oh, corona is a medical problem and it has to be dealt with medical means. So just like the bacillus was invented to treat the tuberculosis and other infection diseases, and then you could live on more or less normally. The other camp is to say, no, this is actually something that we have to react by changing the hardware of our cities and our buildings to make us, let's say, pandemic safe for the future, because this might not be the last pandemic we have to deal with. So this would kind of introduce social distancing somehow in the spatial networking of our cities, so to speak. And then there's a third position, right, which I find quite interesting, which says, well, the corona only highlights the issues that we had before the crisis and didn't deal with appropriately, and which now get amplified in their intensity through this crisis. So it makes us more aware of our undone homework, and should be a, let's say, an encouragement or a last reminder to actually set our priorities right and redefine our agenda of the things we have to do. Where on this kind of tripartite scale do you feel more drawn to in your own understanding of what you as an architect should do with this situation?
Yeah, it's very difficult, of course, to predict what will happen. And I can see what happens, and I think a lot of implementations we have right now will stay. For example, the plexi, the glass at the Kasse at the supermarket will most likely stay.
Okay.
And I can imagine that many of these, which are now of these elements, which are quite makeshift, will stay and will be implemented in the design of new supermarkets.
Why do you think so? One could also say, you know, this is once the virus is no longer around, we're fine.
We have flu. It's not pandemic, but we have the flu every year, and I think there will be a higher sensitivity of the flu in any way. So because, I mean, of course, it's medically probably it's a huge difference, but we as a general public, we experience it as a flu.
Okay.
And also many people die from the flu. So the awareness about flu is much higher, and the awareness of getting infected with the virus is much higher. And I think this awareness will somehow remain, at least. So even if we find a drug or a cure against corona, the shock will stay, and if it's preventable by quite easy designs like an acrylic glass between the cashier and customers, it doesn't really hurt, but it could could help.
Okay.
So I think little elements, I don't know how much this is kind of in industrial design level. If you talk about architectural scale and urbanistic scale, I don't know. But I mean, since one student of mine, I like this idea that we are living in times of the lung. We are very much like, how do you call Feinstoff in English?
Like small particles, you mean?
Yes. She wrote it down. I don't know. It's the small particles in the air now. So
microparticles.
Microparticles, which are where we have a threshold for every city, or in general thresholds where it should be not higher than a certain scale.
Yeah.
We forbid smoking because it's so. A lot of things which are now implemented in regional design, urban design, or taken care of, are affecting the lung. Like also the coronavirus. So the lung is also, it started very much with the tuberculosis, which is also kind of coincides with the start of modernity. I'm fascinated by that fresh air, healthy lung is a very big part of the contemporary urban discussion and urban design.
It reminds me a little bit what you're saying to the situation of the, let's say, early 1920s, when architects and especially urbanists were saying something similar, where obviously the air was much more polluted than today, in Western countries at least, because industry was really emitting a lot of emissions, and also close to workers' housing, and where there was really a medical need to actually clean the air, or at least separate these activities to increase health conditions for people. The answer then was really the whole idea of the doctrine of CM4, of the functional separation of the prime functions of the city, working, living, leisure, traffic, spatially, like really separating them spatially, but also setting buildings apart, introduce and integrating more green spaces, setback spaces between buildings. This move
something very similar happens now with smoking. So we separate the smokers from the non-smokers.
Okay.
And with Feinstaub, with this fine particles, we separate the cars. So we make bicycle or biking inner cities, car-free inner cities.
Okay.
Also, there's a regulation that you should not build too close to a highway, not because of the noise, but because of the fine particles in the air. So we have another separation, and coronavirus is also again about separating.
That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So, but this time it would be not based on segregation, wouldn't be not based on function, but on emission, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So if you're a bad emitter, you go this way. For instance, you stay out of the city, right? Out of the inner city zone. You have to park your car. You're not allowed to drive it in the city because you would emit too much bad air. And then you can go on with like say a renewable vehicle that's based by renewable energy, or the bike by your own energy. That's an interesting way to put it.
Sometimes it's also very temporary. Like I think it's also in Germany, in Holland, you have this taped rectangle on the platform for the train, and there's one rectangle where you can smoke, and outside you don't smoke. But if there's no smoker, I can also stand. I mean, everybody can stand in this rectangle. Even if I'm not smoking, I could enjoy the smoke of the others. Yeah. So it's much more fluid, temporary, and not so, not so fixed anymore, I would say.
I would love to know a little bit about the way you understand your work and the intentions and the motivations of your work, because to a large degree, you make things visible that are basically known, or you could find this information. However, often it is put in kind of statistical or abstract form. And what you do is you visualize and you translate this information into a very easy to understand, graspable graphic kind of condition. So one could say you are creating a kind of enlightenment for the understanding of a built environment, and also for the way in which we move and behave ourselves in this environment. Now, this information and this enlightenment, I think, is a very important topic in this crisis, of course, because nobody was prepared how to act, at least not we here in the Western world. Asia was different because with SARS, they had a precedent, they had developed routines, and therefore could create a very good and efficient response to Corona, better than in other parts of the world. But over here, basically, nobody really knew how to act. So it was important that governments and other parties and media would inform people how to behave. To a large degree, people tried to follow. Now we realize there's this phenomenon of disaster fatigue, where people are basically tired of kind of conditioning their behavior in this kind of distance regime, and seemingly, seem to respond now almost irrationally to this situation by pretending everything's normal. And we're seeing now, for instance, in Switzerland and in Germany, numbers are going up again, partially. Do you have a certain hope of basically providing a basis of information that makes people aware that this is actually a phenomenon that should be taken seriously, and that actually requires also us to change the way we live our lives? Or why would you do this work to begin with?
I mean, first of all, I want to understand and what is going on. And as trained as an architect, I only understand when it's drawn in a plan, or not only, but then for me it becomes more real almost if there's a plan, and more understandable. And with me, I always hope that other people do the same and have the same. So it also looks very organized. You can see connections between countries or phenomenon. I don't know if this is so difficult, if this would help would be a help for the future. It could be, but there is also, to a huge degree, we tend to normalize things, like what we said yesterday. We had yesterday a quick talk that on the airports we're very used to go to the to this kind of taking off our shoes, taking off the jacket, taking off my belt, putting out the laptop. It's normal, we would say. That's the normal thing how we. But it is actually not normal. It was introduced, I think, after 9/11, and before that, you just walked through. It was a huge transition in travel and a huge change in the way of traveling, and it did not stop people from traveling. It just numbers go up for people flying, and we, as human beings, we tend to get used to things quite quickly. So, and then we don't, it's what they say, the new normal. It's not the new, it becomes just a normal. That's very interesting. And I'm fascinated anyway by things which we regard as normal. So to draw things which I think are so funny and ridiculous, like this rectangle on the platform where people can smoke, and outside of this rectangle you cannot smoke. I find it extremely hilarious. And yeah, because it always happened to me that I don't watch, and of course, and I think, oh, it smells so like smoking, and I realize I'm in the middle of this rectangle. So yeah, I don't know, I find these elements very interesting. So that reality is so exciting and so full of strange but things and attempts to regulate.
Yeah. What would be for you the ideal way of your material being used? I mean, do you just produce this for a market of interested archae lovers that love these types of drawings, or would you think this material should go into some kind of a political communication about this crisis? I mean, have you ever tried to pitch it to the Austrian government to help feed their disaster response for now and the future?
I did not, but that's, if I would hope something, then it's really that decision makers see the implications and understand in some things, okay, that works, and in other things it does not work at all. It's completely stupid what we have here. So it is, and we discovered through drawing it that some things are just work. They are fair measurements, and others are either too strict or let's say, yeah, not fair, but also maybe not executable. So yeah, that it's just impossible to follow certain rules. And personally, I hope that if we could figure out new designs or alternatives which work better, that's what we are working on now, and also that restrictions get removed. I'm more not afraid, but I think it's a temporary phenomenon. So the design should be as much as possible temporary. And just if we have the next occasion, we just put it in, take my mask off, and we say, okay, 4 weeks. We have to take care, 5 weeks from the last experience, and then over again, so that it becomes more of a way of life, and yeah, something we have to deal with, than total shutdown and roads closed and blocks, that we more develop a habit, and an architectural, but also yeah, spatially a habit, but also yeah, a habit.
In our last conversation that I had the week before with Ana Pujana, she said something interesting, this architect from Barcelona. She had a very interesting thought where she said maybe one of the biggest effects of Corona to architecture could be to understand that one of the key qualities this discipline has to provide in terms of the intelligence of spatial design would be resilience. The understanding that we have to design our cities and buildings much more resilient in the sense that they can react to conditions they cannot be predicted for, or that we understand maybe that this work becomes more and more temporary, in the sense of a temporary architecture that isn't built for eternity, but is built for a condition, a specific condition that it has, that you need to cope with. And what you do needs to have this type of elasticity to a specific situation, and not the, let's say, pretension of being valid for eternity, right? I mean, the pyramid was this kind of understanding of an architecture that is valid for the rest of this universe's existence. And we more and more see each other exposed to a situation where we realize the predictions of the past generation about the future, meaning our present, are proven false quicker than these projections were actually made. And I'm wondering, do you think it is possible to imagine an architecture that really refuses to make statements about the long duration in order to confine itself to a temporal specificity for the conditions it has to deal with in the very foreseeable future? So in the sense that architecture would maybe transform more to, let's say, a transitional design, rather than a design of let's say, supposedly eternity.
Yeah, I mean, it's a long dream of architects that we also, in terms of, let's say, keeping ourselves busy as architects and as builders, it would be fantastic to have material which is not that long lasting but organic and would disappear, and we would always just rebuild, almost like clay or adobe structures, which you always have to work on and continuously renew and work on, and then you could really adjust these buildings to new situations. But with steel and concrete, we will not achieve that. So it would start with material, that we dare to work with material that is vulnerable. Funny enough, that we would become stronger, more resilient by using a material which is a little bit less resilient, because the bunker,
less resistant,
the thick concrete bunker is very resilient and or resistant to environmental impact, but is on the other hand unchangeable, as we see in some structures which stand in the middle of cities. Yeah, I'm just for example, I had just one thought to the let's say the reactions to crises and events. If we would react with architecture as we react with some laws, it would be, I think, a terrible trajectory. For example, imagine a handrail of 1 meter, somebody falls down, and then we raise all handrails to 1.20 meters. And then after 3 years, if another casualty happens, then it's 150, and then we have handrails of 2 meters, and then we just live in fences. So if we would react to every event, terrible event, with more measures of prevention, I think our cities would be unlivable so there is always, a kind of negotiation there. How much insecurity can we afford as a society?
Okay, so that means you certainly wouldn't want your research on these kinds of social distancing through this pandemic crisis to become a pretext for kind of putting all this into a new network of rules that try to eternalize these kind of distancing protocols, right?
Yes, I would be very much against it.
Yeah. And so it is, the purpose of this is basically to make people understand that they have to negotiate these conditions through their own behavior, as opposed to subordinating our environment to kind of materialize these kinds of safety protocols for now and forever, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we are now in the design phase. So this was what I showed about the Neufert was more the status quo, and now we try to design elements which could help almost, or which could be solve it better. And the most beautiful design I saw it was yesterday from a student was tiles 1.5 by 1.5 meters for Kassel. So it's not, yeah, it's just tiles on the floor of Kassel. But if there's a pandemic, I can see on the tiles how much distance I have to leave between the person in front and me. I think, yeah, this is a kind of degree of, how to say, intervention. I think, yeah, cool, it's nice.
Okay.
Yeah, that you have, but it's not, how do you call it? It's not compulsory. It's suggestive. It's very suggestive.
It's interesting when you spoke about the bunker, just as this kind of unchangeable environment. I also had to think of the bunkers that you show in the exhibition, and the fact that basically these bunkers are not safe anymore today. Can you talk a little bit about this to our audience that hasn't seen it? The bunker dusters I'm referring to.
Yeah, the bunker busters. So in the Handbook of Tyranny, there's one chapter called bunker busters, and there are not so many bunker busters, which are bunker penetrating bombs developed in the world. I think it's about 20, because they are very expensive, very sophisticated bombs, and they're specially designed to penetrate thick concrete structures like bunkers. And the most extreme version is the mother of all bombs by the United States, owned by the United States. Developed, these bunker busters are all developed by private companies, of course. And this mother of all bombs can penetrate up to 60-meter concrete, reinforced concrete. So there is no possibility of a man-made structure that it is safe, that you are safe in a man-made structure from a bomb. So it's almost useless to build a bunker nowadays. I mean, it would be possible to make a huge tunnel in a granite mountain, which are very much deeper, but yeah.
I think this is a really interesting moment in the exhibition when you understand that basically no architecture can be strong enough to really secure your own existence against some threats. You realize that a lot of architects, I mean, a lot of the raison d'être of architecture was to provide the safety. And if we now understand, even the safest building, the bunker, cannot really guarantee safety anymore. Maybe we are at the juncture in the history of architecture where we have to understand that architecture will not help us. And what will help us is if we negotiate our fear and try to live with fear as opposed to resort to all kinds of defensive mechanisms provided by architecture and infrastructure to help us kind of guard us up against whatever kind of threats there might be. Because this was the other interesting, of course, fact about this crisis, that most nation states tried to fight the virus within the confines of their national borders, closing borders to their neighbor country to protect themselves. And obviously we understood, as did Mr. President Trump, that the virus is international. It's not a Chinese virus. It's a global virus that transcends all kinds of borders. So in that sense, maybe the corona crisis could become almost an encouragement of a truly global thinking, in the sense that we realize we're all in this together, and we either work against this united and hand in hand, or we will perish each and ourselves in our wonderful solitary confinement. So the whole idea of splendid isolation as a way of autonomous existence, or a model of national sovereignty, somehow seems to have come to its abrupt end. So that could be actually a silver lining of this whole crisis, to finally make us all understand, well, we're in such deep shit with the environment crisis, with the social crisis, economical crisis, that we actually have to think about how we get to a level of cooperation that is truly post-national, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So there's good things that come out of this situation as well, right?
No, certainly. I also think, yeah, that the local quarantine, or it really worked. I mean, and it works. And national borders. It's just because they were there to easily implement. So it was the national governments were in charge, and they were in charge of national borders. So what they did is closing national borders.
Yeah.
That was kind of a weird reaction.
Yeah.
So I'm the Austrian government. What do? I close the Austrian border. There was no thinking, on a finer grain. It's afterwards very strange.
Yeah. Well, let's hope that your work in particular can help kind of to inform a rational thinking, mode of thinking about this, the conditions of this situation that we're living through. I think your drawings are very, very helpful and enlightening. And I had a couple of moments when I saw them where I really understood something, like in the fraction of a second. And it's a beautiful experience to actually kind of see through things through the help of a drawing that are difficult to penetrate maybe by a text or so. So I always enjoy that about your work, and I'm looking forward to the publication of this work that you've done. We will show obviously, as I said, this work at the museum until the end of August, so people can watch it there. We will probably also have some more additional content, maybe a film. It's not yet clear. So this is all very exciting. I'm really thankful, Theo, that you and your students from Kassel did this work as an immediate reflection and analysis of the condition that we're still in, and that we don't know how long we're going to be in. Already we can see that the audience of our museum, they studied this stuff closely, and
okay.
They are they're really standing in front of these boards that you've sent us and that we installed on the big prison fence. And look at this stuff closely. There's a lot of lines. There's text to read. So you would say it's kind of dry content, but it's not, because people understand immediately. They can learn something, and if the museum can do that, that's nice. Now that especially we have the museum open again. So yeah, thanks a lot, really, and please extend my thanks to your students, without whom this work wouldn't have been possible. We will communicate this work as good as we can in the museum and outside the museum, and through additional performances. I want to say that until August 30th, this is how long you can see the exhibition. So it's really a special decision we made, that we extended the show because we think it's so relevant. And not only that we have more updated content from Theo Deutinger, but we also have more updated content from Forensic Architecture and the room next to it, who provided 3 more films. So it's really worth coming to the show. We're really happy. We will talk to Eyal Weizmann also within this series. I don't know exactly the date, but if you check our Instagram, you will be informed every time that we will have a new speaker. Next week, we're going to have Jeannie Gang from Studio Gang from Chicago. We're delighted for that. So that's June 25th. at 8 p.m. because of the time delay. So we're dealing with several hours of time jet lag. And I'm very curious how that will go. And we will have more reflections, more updated content from different contexts. So thanks, Theo, for today's conversation. And we look forward to see how this work will be received by the audience, and we will let you know. Yeah. Thank you, and see you next week on Thursday, 8 p.m. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.